right, we're back on the record. Mr. Shea, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Officer Daniel Beckwith.
You solemnly swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, for you so affirm.
I do.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you state your name, please?
Officer Daniel Beckwith.
Can you spell it for the record?
First name D-A-N-I-E-L, last name B-E-C-K-W-I-T-H.
Where are you employed, sir?
Flagstaff Police Department.
In what capacity?
Police officer.
How long have you been so employed?
Since December of 2014.
Okay.
About 3 years.
All right. Can you give us a brief understanding of your training and experience?
I received the title of officer after completing an 18-week training academy where I was trained in Title 13 Criminal Code, Title 28 Traffic Code. After completing the academy, I then came back to the Flagstaff Police Department where I received further training through the field training program by a senior officer for approximately another 4 months where they taught me in field activities and further taught me through the Title 28 Traffic Code and Title 13 Criminal Code.
Okay. When did you become a officer on your own?
Approximately April 2015.
You're on duty today?
I am.
Directing your attention, officer, to the very early morning hours of October 9th of 2015. Do you recall that time frame?
I do.
At approximately 1:20 a.m., were you dispatched someplace?
I was dispatched to 216 Mountain View Drive in reference to multiple shots fired.
All right. Were you in a cruiser, on foot, on a bicycle?
In a patrol vehicle,
All right.
cruiser.
How long do you think that it took you to get there?
I'd estimate just a couple minutes. It didn't take me very long. I was within the area.
Okay. Do you recall where you were? You were at...
I was just at where the Aspen Village complex is now, next to Butler and Lone Tree. I was around there.
All right. So just a couple of minutes to get there?
Yes.
Is that the extent of the information you had as you approached the scene?
There was multiple reporting parties which indicated that it wasn't just fireworks or anything like that, that it was a more serious scene.
Okay. When you arrived in that area, which way did you come and where did you park?
So when I initially responded, I was on Butler Ave, which is parallel to Franklin. I don't recall the exact street I came down. It was either Verde or South O'Leary Street that I came southbound on, and then I turned onto Franklin and proceeded westbound until I parked my patrol vehicle around the area and then ran over to the scene.
Okay. Lights and siren?
Lights and sirens.
Any other officers there that you observed at that time?
There was at least one NAU PD officer and then 2 officers from my squad.
What did you do when you arrived at the scene?
When I initially arrived on scene, I heard my fellow officers ordering people to get on the ground. I ran over to the scene. We detained several individuals within the parking lot and then proceeded to try to gather what happened.
All right. What happened by talking to witnesses?
Correct.
Why was it necessary to get everybody on the ground?
At that time, we didn't know who was involved, who was the shooter. We had no further information at that point what exactly happened. We were just trying to determine at that point who was involved and possibly who was a threat.
All right, so you came in through that gate in front of Mountain View Hall off of Franklin there?
Correct.
And so that would be up that kind of wide sidewalk with Mountain View on one side and the parking lot on the other?
That's correct.
And what was the first thing that you observed besides officers ordering people to the ground?
I observed one male individual on the ground and a female applying pressure to some wounds, and then another male individual just past the sidewalk in some either gravel or mulch that was laying motionless.
All right. What else?
The male that was getting, or that had wounds, and the female was applying pressure, he was, screaming for his friend.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
Sustained.
Move to stricken.
Stricken.
So just not what anybody said, but just what you observed.
At that point, I observed those two male individuals. There were several other people within the area, and then I placed a male individual into handcuffs at that point and detained him.
Okay. Excuse me for a moment. All right. Did you identify that person at that time, or?
I did not.
Okay. Anything about a weapon?
Yeah, there were several people saying
It's not offered for the truth of the matter asserted, Judge.
Okay, can you repeat that? Play that back, Steve.
I'm sorry?
Have Steve play it back.
Oh. Anything about a weapon?
Also object in grounds of vagueness, Your Honor.
And for, Mr. Shea, for what purpose are you offering that? For what purpose are you offering it?
To explain what the officer did, why he did it.
I'll allow it.
All right, so the question was, did you respond relative to a weapon at that time?
I did. There was several people directing me to a handgun that was laying towards, by the tree on the southeast corner of the parking lot.
Okay, did you go in that direction?
I did. After I observed that there was several people still walking around freely, and that it was unsafe to leave that loaded weapon lying there, I cleared the chamber, took the one round out that was in the chamber, and took the magazine out, and then placed it into a bag.
Okay, and to whom did you provide the magazine and the one round?
To Officer Coda.
Why was securing the weapon important to you at that time?
Well, at that time, we still hadn't determined who all was involved or what was going on. There were still people, like I said, freely walking around. It did not seem safe to leave a loaded weapon on the ground when there was people freely walking around and we didn't know exactly who could be involved.
All right. Fair to say there was a flashlight on the weapon that you cleared?
There was.
And was that on or not on at the time that you handled the weapon?
I did not observe a flashlight that was on.
You saw the flashlight?
I saw the flashlight on the weapon, but it was not on.
What did you do with the weapon after you cleared it?
I placed it back to where I found it.
Okay. How soon after that would you say that the officers had the scene completely under control?
Within a matter of 5 minutes, we were actually able to start moving people out of the immediate scene, start interviewing them, and had medics on scene attending to people.
Okay. Did you remain at the scene or did you leave?
I remained on scene interviewing people until I took 2 individuals to the station to be further interviewed by detectives.
All right. All right, Officer Beckwith, we're going to show you what's been marked as exhibit number 316. If you'll direct your attention to the screen. Let's go back to, yeah. Officer, do you recognize what we're looking at here?
I do.
And what's the name of that building?
The Mountain View dorms, or I just know that is the Mountain View parking lot.
All right, and that's the area that we've been discussing, is that correct?
That's correct.
If you can pan to the left so we can see the gate. Is this what we're showing right now, the area that you entered through?
Yes.
Okay, so that's right when you arrived at the scene, you entered through that kind of opening in the fence?
Yes, I did.
All right, and then you went from there directly to the other end of the parking lot?
That's correct, where the tree is over here,
Okay,
that area.
all right. So if we can move down there, Aaron. All right, so I see you have the laser pointer there. And again, can you just indicate to the jury what observations you made in this area? Where were the people lying? Where was the gun?
So the male subject that I was talking about that had the female applying pressure was somewhere in this area over here. The male subject that was motionless was over here, and the weapon was found in this area over here.
Okay. Nothing further, Judge?
Mr. Davidson.
Just a very brief second. Just a couple of questions for you, sir. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Without going into any detail about what was said, was one of the subjects that you interviewed on scene an individual named Jacob Mike?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the illumination device or the type of illumination device that was on the pistol that you secured and then put back on the ground?
I'm not sure what your question is.
Have you seen other illumination devices that are used with handguns?
Yes.
And is there a difference between a toggle switch and a pressure switch on an illumination device?
Yes, there is a difference.
Okay, what's the difference between a toggle switch and an illumination switch?
Well,
I'm sorry, I misspoke, sir. A toggle switch and a pressure switch.
toggle switch is generally in front of the trigger and you hit the switch and it turns it on and it stays on. A pressure switch is something you typically have to hold to keep on.
So the toggle switch is sort of like a switch on a wall, off.
That's correct.
And a pressure switch comes on when you apply pressure to it, and then if pressure is removed, it automatically turns off, correct?
That's correct.
Do you recall if this particular pistol had both a toggle switch and a pressure switch?
I don't recall.
Thank you, sir. No further questions.
Redirect.
Nothing, Judge, thank you.
I'll turn to members of our jury and see if they have any questions for Officer Beckwith. Does not appear that we do. Can this officer be excused?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. Officer Beckwith, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Shea.
Thank you, Judge. The state calls Officer Alex Chirovsky. Alex Chirovsky.
What's your step?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, or do you so affirm?
I do.
Go ahead, Mr. Shea.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you state your name, please?
Officer Alex Chirovsky.
Can you spell it for the record, please?
It's A-L-E-X. My last name is C-H-I-R-O-V-S-K-Y.
Where are you employed, sir?
Flagstaff Police Department.
In what capacity?
As a police officer.
How long have you been so employed?
About 2.5 years.
Joined the force a little later in your career?
Correct.
Can you give the jury a brief understanding of your training and experience?
Sure. After I was hired, I attended the Arizona Law Enforcement Academy in Phoenix, Arizona. After completing the academy, I came back up to Flagstaff, went through a field training program with various officers, passed the field training program, and then was assigned to individual patrol.
All right. How long have you been on individual patrol?
For about, say about a year and 3/4 of a year. So about a year and...
Well, when did you go on individual patrol? Let's put it that way.
I believe that would have been July of 2015.
All right. So directing your attention to October 9th of 2015, do you recall the very early morning hours of that date?
I do.
Were you working?
Yes.
At about 1:20 a.m., did you respond to a dispatch?
I did.
And what was the dispatch?
It was a report of multiple people being shot on the NAU campus near the Mountain View Hall.
Where were you at the time that you received the dispatch?
I was at the police station.
Which is where?
It's located at 911 East Sawmill Road. I'd say probably about a mile and a half away from Mountain View Hall.
All right. So the police station's there, the sheriff's office is there.
Correct.
The apartment complex called The Grove is not too far from there.
Across the street, correct.
Right. And by which route did you go to, where were you dispatched to specifically?
They stated that the incident was occurring in the parking lot of Mountain View Hall on NAU campus.
All right. And so how did you go from the police station to Mountain View Hall?
I left the police station parking lot, headed west on Sawmill Road, turned right onto Lone Tree, left onto Franklin Avenue, up the hill and down, which leads right to the scene.
how long would you estimate that it took you to get there from the time of the dispatch?
I would say maybe 30 seconds to a minute.
Where were you using lights and sirens?
Correct.
Where did you park?
I parked on the south side of Franklin Avenue near Verde Street, near the intersection of Verde Street.
Okay. Where did you go from there?
At that point, I exited my vehicle, got on the south side sidewalk of Franklin Avenue, and started towards the parking lot of Mountain View Hall.
All right. So were you on foot for a period of time?
Correct.
How long was that period of time?
A few seconds.
All right. And how did you approach Mountain View Hall?
I approached Mountain View Hall from the east, and as I approached the entrance to the parking lot, there were other officers also arriving at the same time.
Okay. What was your first observation?
My first observation was general confusion and chaos. There were multiple groups of people, pockets of people scattered throughout the parking lot.
All right. Did you head towards, well, can you just kind of, at that point in time, where did you see these pockets of people?
The first group of people that I noticed, there were about 4 individuals. They were near the entrance of the parking lot to Mountain View Hall.
All right.
Just bundled up right against, there's a tall pillar for the gate that retains the gate, and some landscaping rocks, and there were about 4 individuals right there.
All right, so what did you do?
At that point, myself and other officers instructed everybody to the ground. At that point, we didn't quite yet know exactly what was happening. And essentially, we were just trying to secure everyone who was there. Ordered everyone to the ground and started placing handcuffs on individuals who were there.
Okay. Anything of particular note about anybody in that first group of people?
So in the first group of people, there was one individual who was screaming, pretty much in agony, and claimed to have been shot.
Overruled. Go ahead.
Answer.
Claimed to have been shot, and also one of the other individuals who was part of that group also told me that his friend had been shot.
Sustained.
Move to strike.
That last statement will be stricken.
Okay. All right, so maybe avoiding what people specifically told you, but did you make further observations of the person who said that they'd been shot?
Correct. That individual was laying on his back. I asked him to roll over so I could see that he was claiming to have an injury. Rolled him over, looked at his lower back, noticed there was a gunshot wound there. There was some dried blood at this point on the ground, but the wound itself was no longer bleeding.
All right. So what did you do next?
I assured him that the wound was no longer bleeding, and just told him to stay calm, stay there, and wait for medical attention to arrive.
All right. Did you remain there, or did you move on?
At that point, I noticed a second group of people further inwards into the parking lot.
So did you proceed in that direction?
Correct.
Did you also see Officer Herrera there?
Yes.
And you had not what you said, but you just had a brief exchange with him. Is that fair to say?
Correct, yeah, just kind of talking about what was going on
Okay.
between him and I.
And then you headed in the group of the second group of people, in the direction of the second group of people?
Correct.
And where was that?
That was, I would estimate, in a slight southwest direction from that group. I couldn't tell you exactly how far, but there were approximately 5 individuals in that group, with other people standing around, and other officers already standing in that area with them.
Okay, so those folks were, by the time you arrived, already on the ground, already in handcuffs, or?
Correct. I believe the 5 individuals that I could see were all either told to be on the ground or were on the ground already.
All right. Did you observe anybody who appeared to be injured?
Yes.
Can you describe that, please?
There was one individual who was laying on his back with his legs crossed, and he appeared to have a gunshot wound to his chest.
All right. Was he moving or responding at all?
No, not at all.
Did you see anybody else who appeared to be injured?
Yeah, about 10 to 15 feet away from that individual was another male who was laying on his back, screaming in pain, who stated he was also shot.
With regards to the first individual who appeared to be shot, did you respond to him in any way?
I did. I immediately looked at him, could tell that it appeared he was in bad shape, attempted to obtain a pulse on that individual, was unable to locate a pulse, and at that point instructed another officer to begin chest compressions.
Okay. Did that other officer do compressions, or?
I don't believe he wasn't able to react in time, so I took over and began performing chest compressions on that individual.
All right. And you continued that until when?
Had to have been a few minutes, continued chest compressions, and then I believe an NAU police officer approached me and asked if I needed to be relieved or if he could take over for me.
Okay. And he took over?
He did eventually, yes.
Do you know, was that officer, do you know who that officer was?
I don't recall his name exactly, but he was a NAU police officer.
All right. What about medics or fire personnel?
That throughout the situation, I had been contacting dispatch, requesting for medical personnel to move into the scene. As I was conducting chest compressions on the one individual, I again requested to have them move in immediately and come to my location. It appeared that this individual was in the worst shape. And I believe at that time dispatch advised that they were en route, they were on their way.
When the NAU PD officer took over for you, did you turn your attention to somebody else?
I did. The second individual in that group who claimed to have been shot.
I'm not asking you what anybody said to you, but just what you observed and then what you did.
Okay. The second individual, I proceeded over to him because the chest compressions were taken over by a different officer. Proceeded over to him. I carry a medical kit in my bulletproof vest, so I deployed that on that individual. He was shot once in the lower left hip, I believe, and in the right arm.
Okay. And there was a young lady also attending to
There
him?
was, yeah. There was a young lady who was helping him, keeping pressure on his wounds.
And between the two of you, you continued to try to place pressure on those wounds?
Correct, yeah. I deployed a quick clotting agent from my medical kit onto both of those wounds, and she assisted me in kind of just holding pressure, keeping him calm.
The clotting agent does what?
It stops the bleeding.
So there was active bleeding?
Correct, yeah. He was actively bleeding from both wounds.
Again, not asking you what he said, but did you engage in any kind of conversation about what happened with him?
I did. I initially identified him. He told me his name was Nicholas Peering.
Okay.
I asked who the other individual was. He told me.
Your Honor, you're safe. This is not responsible.
So I'll withdraw, Judge.
Okay.
Again, trying to avoid what people said to you, did you in fact engage him in a conversation, however brief, of what happened?
Yes.
Okay. And did he respond to you? Again, not asking you what his response was, but the fact of a response. Did he respond?
Can we approach?
Sure.
Fair to say that you spoke to Mr. Peering and he was able to respond to your questions in a way that you could understand. Is that correct?
Yes, very clearly.
Now, did medical personnel respond to that scene at that time?
They did.
And who did they attend to first? Was it either one or both?
I believe there were two groups of medical personnel. They were pointed out to go to the first individual who was laying on his back unresponsive. They first went over there and then sent someone else over to where I was with the second individual.
Fair to say that shortly after that, the scene was under control?
It was calmer. There were enough officers there to keep everything where it was as medical personnel came in to tend to the scene as well.
What were the remainders of your actions or assignments at that scene?
After that, I just assisted in securing the rest of the scene, putting up crime scene tape, clearing the rest of the vehicles that were in the parking lot to ensure no one was hiding anywhere or anyone else was outstanding. Trying to locate any additional witnesses, and then eventually securing a secondary crime scene in front of, I believe the address was 262 East Franklin.
All right. And did you observe, well, just briefly, what did you observe there?
In that secondary crime scene? I was assigned to keep the crime scene log at that crime scene, and I believe there was, in that apartment at that address, there had been a situation that happened there involving one of the other victims, and other officers arrived on scene and decided that it was necessary to check that apartment to see if there was anyone else wounded inside or in need of any type of assistance. And they proceeded into the apartment as I just held the perimeter of that apartment, just not allowing anyone to go in, essentially.
Did they then come back out of the apartment?
They did.
Did they have another individual with them?
They had two individuals with them that they brought down from the apartment.
Okay. Referring again to exhibit number 316, if you'll direct your attention, officer, to what's projected on the screen. Can you see that?
I can.
Do you recognize the area that's currently projected?
I do.
What is that?
It's East Franklin Avenue, adjacent to Mountain View Hall.
All right. And do you recognize that building that is panning into the shot now?
Yes.
What is that building?
That would be 262 East Franklin.
What do you understand that building to be?
That is the apartment that I had just described, that first door on the left.
All right. Officer, can you tell us what we're looking at here relative to your testimony?
This is the entrance to the parking lot at Mountain View Hall.
Okay. Is that the way that you entered in?
Correct. So I entered along the sidewalk from the left side of the image towards that last pillar of the fence, and that's where I encountered the first group.
Okay. There might be a laser pointer up there in front of you?
Yes.
Can you, with this view, can you indicate where the first group was?
Would have been right here.
All right. And proceed a little further in. All right. Again, with that laser pointer from this view, can you indicate where it was that you encountered that group?
This area right in front of these rocks here.
All right. Now, you at one point proceeded from there to another group of individuals, is that correct?
Correct.
And with this view here, can you tell us the direction that you went?
I would have been across this direction to approximately right here.
Okay. And from this view, can you indicate where that second group of individuals was?
They were collected in this general area.
All right. In terms of a still. Referring judge to exhibit 353. Does that scene look familiar to you, Officer Chirovsky?
It does.
How many, I think you indicated how many people were there when you arrived. Is that depicted here in this still photograph?
Yes.
And the two individuals that you attended to are where?
The first is here, and the second is here.
All right. And the individuals that are standing up in that photograph are,
These are police officers.
all right. Another still from 353. Officer Chirovsky, what do you see there?
This is the first group of individuals.
And that's at 353 at 120 for the record. Is that right? All right, and that's a handful of individuals there, is that fair?
Correct.
Now, were there a lot of other people in the parking lot, a few other people?
I believe there were a variety of people walking around the outside of it, but as far as the parking lot itself, as best I can recall, it was this group, the second group, and then from what I could tell, my focus was on those individuals. There were other law enforcement personnel moving through the scene pretty rapidly, so I couldn't accurately tell you if there was anyone other than law enforcement moving around actively in that area.
Fair enough. Nothing further at this time, Judge?
Mr. Davidson?
Very briefly, is it fair to say that there were other officers present by the time you arrived?
Yes, yeah.
It was still a very tense and dynamic situation, though, was it not?
Yes.
And even after things were controlled to the point where you felt it was safe for you to provide medical assistance to the people over by the southeast corner of the parking lot, you were still mindful of concerns you had about the safety of the situation. Is that fair?
Correct.
I would assume then that it's also fair to state that making observations and mental notes as to whether or not Mr. Peering appeared to be under the influence of alcohol was not something you were at all focused on at that time.
Sorry, could you rephrase that,
Sure.
please?
I asked it very poorly. I apologize. Were you at all focused on assessing whether or not Mr. Peering appeared to be displaying symptoms of alcohol impairment during your interaction with him?
No.
You interviewed some witnesses while you were present?
Yes.
And again, without going into what they said, there was an individual named Emily and an individual named Michael?
Yes.
Emily Coltrap and Michael Mullen, correct?
Yes, I don't believe I physically interviewed them. Those were the two individuals that were brought out from 262 East Franklin.
Okay, I'm not asking you what they said.
Correct.
Those, Emily Coltrap and Michael Mullen, those were the two that came out of 262?
Correct.
As you stood perimeter and other officers
Correct.
went in to clear the
Correct.
place? Okay. And is that part of what's sometimes referred to as the courtyard?
I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you what the nickname for it is or the name of the apartment.
Fair to say that's the apartment right across the street from the...
Correct, yes.
From the parking lot where this happened?
Yep, the one I pointed out in those images.
Okay. And you saw them exit the apartment at that location?
Yeah, they were escorted out by those other officers, yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Nothing further.
Redirect.
Nothing, Judge.
All right, I'll turn to members of our jury and see if they have any questions for the officer. It looks like we do. I'll see counsel and court reporter at sidebar. So, Officer Chirovsky, the jurors do have a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
The first question is, how many individuals were in the first group? How many had gunshot wounds? And if you would exclude law enforcement in that number?
In the first group, there were 4 individuals, and only one had a gunshot wound.
The next question is, how many individuals were in the second group? How many had gunshot wounds? And also, if you would exclude law enforcement from that number?
The second group, to the best of my knowledge that I can recall, had about 5 individuals, and 2 of them had gunshot wounds.
Okay. A follow-up.
Thank you, Judge. Just with regards to that first group, when you arrived, were the other 3 individuals, did they appear to be helping the one who was shot, or were they already on the ground, or what was the story?
Objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope of the question.
Sustained.
All right, Judge, and follow up to that second question, I'd like to bring up that image again. Officer Chirovsky, is this the first or the second group?
That would be the second group.
All right. And I don't know if you can count from there how many individuals were there? Excluding police officers?
I can see 5 from what I can tell.
All right. All right. Anything further?
5, and then there's one more to the right.
All right. So now you're saying 6 is what you can count now?
In that image, yes. I didn't see the 2 where I'm not including in my count. I'm counting only the ones who are laying on the ground. So I'm not including the young lady who's on her knees.
All right. So if you include her, then there's 7?
Correct. Who are non-law enforcement.
All right. No further questions, Judge.
Mr. Davidson.
Just so we're all on the same page, when you say the first group, you're referring to the group of people that you encountered sort of in the northeast corner of the parking lot by the Franklin entrance?
Correct.
And there was one individual who appeared to have an injury in that group.
Correct.
Did you ascertain the identity of that person?
I did not.
Were you able to ascertain the name or identity of either of the 2 individuals who appeared to have been injured in the second group from the images the prosecutor just showed?
Yes.
Okay. And what were their names? We talked about one, I'm sorry, obviously, Nicholas Peering.
Correct. And the second was Colin Bro.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Could this one?
I apologize, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
And with regard to the identities of the other individuals in these groups who were not injured, was that information that you obtained?
I did not. I did not identify anyone outside of that scope.
So aside from the 3 people we just talked about?
Correct.
Well, actually, we don't know who the injured person was in the first group.
Correct. I'm not aware. I did not identify him at the time.
Okay, so we don't know the identity of anybody in the first group, correct?
I do not, no.
And as far as the second group, it's just the 2 individuals, Mr. Peering and Mr. Brew, whose identity is known to you?
Correct. The 2 who were injured.
Okay, thank you.
Can Officer Chirovsky be excused?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, officer.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, folks, let's go ahead and take a 10-minute recess. Please remember